Welcome to Lakus channel. This is class number 4 in the fourth discourse, so 4-4 of the great monumental book B'Shashek Dimu 5672 Tafresh Ayin Beis. This discourse is called Naso Yisroel, and again, this is class number 4. So in yesterday's class, or in the last class, we're in the middle of chapter 12 in the overall discourse, and yesterday we were beginning we were developing the idea that there must be that the oiros, the lights of the sphirot in Atzilus, of the attributes that are in Atzilus, are not utterly and completely free of definition, and they would not be utterly and completely infinite with the pure sense of true infinity. Because, as we were learning yesterday, we find, the main proof we had yesterday was we find that even on levels where there are no kalim, where there are no vessels, in which he brought out the idea of atik yomin in the level of Ancient of Days, where there is no vessels, and yet there are 10 sfirot. If the concept of definitions, if the characterization of things only is coming from the vessels, there's no question that the vessels are the primary cause of limitations, boundaries, definitions, characterizations, and so on and so forth, specifications. There is no question. And there is no question that the lights are the force of limitlessness. The question is, can we completely extrapolate the light and remove it from any bit of definition whatsoever? That he's proving that it's not the case. And because he says that in Atik Yomin, where there are no Kalim, as we learned yesterday, Ein Elokim Imadi, there's no force of Elokim on that level. Yesterday we had a whole discussion to explain that there is no Kalim, we mean completely no Kalim in the level of Atik Yomin. And yet, there are 10 spherots over there. So that forces us to say that there must be already sphera, that the differentiation of one light and the other light is not only when the light shines in the vessel, but that the lights themselves have already somewhat of a leaning or somewhat of a design that would therefore be able to call the lights different lights. Okay. So now he's continuing and he's going to bring us another level. Ukamoy Kain, he says, Ba'akudim. Last time we brought the proof from Atik Yomin, the level of Atik Yomin, there is no lights, there's only there's no vessels, there's only lights. Now he says, remember yesterday I mentioned that Adam Kadmon is the first world after the Tzimtzum, is the level called Adam Kadmon. In the general world, remember we said that, Adam Kadmon, primordial man. Lower than Adam Kadmon. Now in Adam Kadmon, although yesterday we discussed there are Kalim over there are vessels over there, because Adam Kadmon positions itself as the level, as not as Atik Yomin of the worlds, but as the Erech Anpin of the worlds, which is a lower level where the Erech Anpin is already, in a very, very subtle, benign way, has already Kalim. But in general, when we speak in Adam Kadmon, in general, it's a world without Kalim, because the Kalim are not perceived in that world. The vessels are not perceived in that world. Remember, we learned that it's due because the light is so bright. Where do Kalim begin in general worlds? It's in the level beneath Adam Kadmon, which is called the world of Akudim. Akudim, I don't have the exact it's like a ring. It's like the concept of Akudim comes from by Yaakov, when he was made a deal with his uncle Lavan. He needed to, in order to decide what would be his share in the profits of the flocks, he made a deal with him, and he said that all the sheep that will come out spotted, you remove all the spotted, speckled, and ringed animals from the flocks, and just leave me the white, pure ones, the single color ones, and everything that will be born from now on and here and after, speckled, spotted, and whatever, those will be my sheep, which was almost genetically impossible. And yet, Yaakov made a fortune, all the animals turned that way. But it mentions over there these various different spots and speckles and so forth. The Torah uses various different words, and the Kabbalists have a heyday with this. In other words, you can see a regular story of the Torah that seems to be relating a business transaction between two individuals, which literally happened in this world, but alluding to some deep mystical secrets. And included in those mystical secrets is various different worlds. And Akudim is a state of existence where the Kalim are beginning to form. It's starting already to be observable, a vessel. But in Akudim, it says an interesting thing. That world, you don't have 10 vessels yet. You have one vessel, and all 10 lights are nechaz, are kind of holding on to that one vessel. They're all wrapped into one vessel. It's only in the next world, which is called the world of Nekudim. Nekudim means spots, where the 10 dots come forth, which means 10 individual vessels. In Akudim, all 10 vessels are still seen as one vessel. And all 10 lights are now nekad in this one keli, in this one vessel. So over here he's going to say, well, if there's only one vessel, and yet there are 10 lights, this is another proof that you can have variation of light, even if there's no vessels to variate them, to make them different one from each other. Why? You see that the lights are also tainted in a very, very subtle way. Well, Kamoiken, that's the second proof he's bringing. Kamoiken ba'akudim isa be'etz chayim. In Akudim it says in Eitz Chayim, regarding the world of Akudim, shen eser oiros, there are 10 lights, bekeli echad, they're all in one vessel. Hare, what do we see from here? Sheyesh eser spheres ba'oiros atzmam, there are 10 spheres in the lights. Gam kamoy shem akudim bekeli echad, even when they are nekad, even when they are attached to one vessel. So this too is an indicator that we cannot blame the vessels completely for the definitions. The lights also have to take some credit for that. And we saw it from a world, the earlier example was from even a more abstract state, from the level of Atik Yomin, which in Atik Yomin there are no vessels at all, just pure lights. And even there are 10 spheres. And now he's continuing in the world of Akudim, where the world of Akudim does has vessels, but only one vessel, and yet there are 10 lights. So all of this serves to prove that the differentiation happens already in the light, and that the lights are not, in the words of Chassidus, pshutim legamri, utterly and completely simple without any definition. And now, all of this till now was a proof from certain Kabbalistic sources. And now he's going to prove it just logically. Ube'emes, and in truth, if the lights would be utterly limitless, which is the argument that we were seeking to make, that the lights are not differentiable, they're not definable, which means they're limitless, because every differentiation comes about by a specific definition, which is a limitation. It's this and not that. That's a definition. If we say the lights have no definition, it means they're limitless, and that's what we want to argue. That was the initial argument. But if that would be the case, then the lights would never be able to be enclose themselves in the vessels. What are we talking about? We're talking about the lights that become the soul for the vessels. The vessels is like the body, and the light becomes its soul. Now these are lights that are orpnimi. These are internalized lights, as we discussed a long time at the beginning of the discourse, going way back when we started. We're talking about the soul vesting itself into each appropriate limb. That's what was the whole idea of an orpnimi. And one of the ideas we were learning, that the light not just vests itself, but it reveals itself in its appropriate vessel, both physically. We were learning how the vessels have a grasp on the energies that go into it, and they affect it, they limit it, they grab it, they take it, they internalize it. The light manifests and is felt in the vessel. If that's the case, these lights of Atzilus are now fully revealing themselves and manifesting in the vessels. Now, the vessels of Atzilus are definitely limited. The vessels definitely have character and definition. That's what makes Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes. That's what makes this. The whole point we were trying to make was that the vessels have limitation, but the lights are not limited. But one thing we definitely have to agree on that the kalim, the vessels, have limitation. Remember, we discussed the whole where they originate from, the power of gvul, the power of limitation, the oisius hareshimu, the traced letters. But we were definitely all on board with the vessels having limitation. Now, if the vessel is limited, then how would the vessel be able to facilitate a revelation of something that is utterly limitless? How can that manifest and reveal itself internally in a vessel when the vessel is limited? It could not in any way handle a limitless revelation, because every finite entity can only absorb a limited amount of energy, a limited revelation, or else it blows a fuse, or else it's destroyed. So that's what he says. This is an accepted idea. This is understood by everybody. It's logic. It's accepted. This goes back to the Rabbi brings it from Sadia Gaon, from the times of the great philosophers. That every body that has limitation to it, it's not possible that should be inside of it in a manner of enclosement, that it should be inside of it a light and a life force that is limitless. Now this is important. The point over here that's important is hislapshus. Hislapshus means enclosed in it. We, for example, are all swimming in infinite light because God is everywhere. God's infinity, and not only is God everywhere, not only Atzmos everywhere, the Or Ein Sof, the expression of God, the infinite light is also everywhere. Even b'makam hatzimtzum, even in the place of the tzimtzum, the light is present. It's really there. It's hidden, but it's there. And if it's the case, how can we tolerate it? The answer is it's makif. It's not pnimi. When something is makif, which means it's encompassing, it means it's not revealing itself in us. And therefore, we can go about doing our business being oblivious of that light. It doesn't impact us when it's an Or Makif. But when it's an Or Pnimi means it's revealing itself within a vessel. Then the balloon can only hold as much as the balloon can stretch. Once you put more air into the balloon than it can stretch, we'll pop the balloon. Once something is internalizing itself and revealing itself, then the vessel has to be a vessel to be able to hold it. And if the vessel is limited, it cannot tolerate and allow for a revelation of something limitless. It cannot be. So, an example Chassidus gives for this. For an Or Makif that doesn't bother. For example, Chassidus gives the example in many places that we all have faith. Faith. Now, faith is a godly experience where our soul experiences the truth of God. And that's why we have a deep conviction in God's existence. But yet it says that faith versus logic. Why is it important that we don't only survive on faith, but we're also supposed to study and learn and understand with our mind the truths of Torah, the truths of God? Why isn't it enough just to have faith? So it's explained because faith is a encompassing power. So when we say that it can't be that a revelation, a Or Makif doesn't bother us, even though it's present, it won't interfere with us because it's Makif. It's even when we say Makif, doesn't mean that we're completely oblivious to it. That's true. There are many things that are present in our space that we occupy, including God Himself, and we're oblivious to it. But here we're talking about even closer Makifim. Even, for example, something that we're conscious of. We literally feel it. But if we're not feeling it in an internalized manner, it's not going to interfere. In other words, we can act and live in contradiction to it, dismiss it, and it's not jamming us. It's not interfering. It's like certain noises that are happening right around us. If it's a quiet room, you can speak. Right now I can talk. It's quiet, thank God, around here. If there's a loud siren of a fire truck going by or a helicopter or a plane, it would interfere. It would be jamming my class. It would be bothering me. Couldn't be giving the class. But there's definitely noises that are happening right now that I don't hear at all. It's not interfering with me because it's in a different frequency. So I don't hear it. Radio waves and stuff like that are transmitting sounds all over the place that I don't hear because it's outside of our frequency. So that's understood. But even when there is a sound that is heard, meaning a noise or a a force, an energy that is sensed and we pick it up, but if it's not internalized, then it still doesn't interfere with us. So Hasidus, there's an example for that we find that people can have faith, and yet people of faith a lot of times can act and do things that are shocking. And it's contrary completely to their faith. The sages talk about a thief that is breaking into a building, to a home or whatever, and the man is a man of faith. So before he goes in, he offers a prayer to God to be successful. And the question is, how can you be doing that? I mean, obviously, the faith has to be valid because the person is not standing in church where he's trying to impress someone else. He's alone on a windowsill. No one is there. So why is he crossing himself or something like that? Why is he, or it could be a Jewish thief as well. Why is he offering a prayer to God while he's going ahead? And if we are honest with ourselves, we can even find within ourselves as well that sometimes maybe with not by stealing and breaking in, but we could sometimes pray to God to help us not get caught when we're doing something we shouldn't be doing. And the question is, well, that's such a contradiction. It's like impossible. Like, yeah, obviously you believe, or else you wouldn't be praying, especially at such a moment where every second counts. But on the other hand, you're acting. You know, if you know clearly that this is against God's will. So why are you asking God for help? You're believing in God and then ignoring Him. The answer it explains in Chassidus is that faith, by its very definition, is not an internalized power, because it's not something that we comprehend. It's a consciousness that's bigger than us, and because it's not fully revealed in us, it's not, as we said earlier, it's not interfering in a person can be on a certain track, driving up a certain road or going on a certain path, and even though the faith contradicts that path, it's not thwarting, it's not derailing the person from going in that direction, because it's hovering. It's not fully revealing itself. However, after you study and you learn and you have a full, powerful conviction based on a comprehension, then at least for a short while, as long as that is fully manifest in the head, you cannot act contrary to what you've just did. That blocks. That's why Chassidus says we have to study and learn about God and know Him, so He becomes internalized, and it will not, because that's the idea that internalization of something means it's fully revealing itself inside, and for that, there has to be consistency. So we take this to what we're learning now. He's saying that if in the oiros, the lights of Atzilus, they fully reveal and internalize themselves in the vessels, and if they would truly be infinite, they couldn't possibly reveal themselves and internalize in a limited vessel, because then they would they would good word for that. They would limitlessize the vessels as well. They would remove all limitation from the vessel. The vessel would also become limitless. Then it wouldn't be a vessel anymore. So, Va'arei, as he says, so from the very notion that the Kalim of Atzilus are hosting these lights, must be that therefore we have to say that the lights are not truly and completely infinite. The Kalim are for sure Gevul, are limited. Because there is an existence of sfirot, of attributes in the world of emanation, in the world of Atzilus. They are a metzius, they are an existence of wisdom and kindness. He's going to have a discussion in a moment if the vessels are limited. That means if they have a limited capacity of kindness and a limited capacity of wisdom, if it's limited wisdom, limited kindness, limited compassion. We're going to see, he's going to speak about that in the next phase. But without a question whether they're limited or not in terms of the quantity, but in terms of quality, in terms of they definitely have definition. The kalim are definitely, the vessels are, from the vessel of kindness can only come kindness. There can't come severity. And from the vessels of discipline and severity can't come kindness. Each one is specific. And that means it's in a metzias. And that itself is a limitation. And we have to say, these, even if we're not ready to accept that somewhat in the lights there are some of this, in the vessels we all are on the same team. We're all on board that the vessels have definitions. And if that's the case, and he proves it, it says in the Tikkunim of Zohar, the Kama Gufin, it refers to the Kalim of Atzilus. It says that many different types of bodies, and it calls them bodies for a reason, just like a body is a limited entity. Obviously, these bodies are the divine body, but it's still a body. The Kama Gufin, the Iskiruya b'Tikkuneda, and they are called in this tikkun, in this formation. What are they called? Chesed Raya Yamina. It's called Chesed, kindness, which is the right arm of God. So it's referring to it as a very limited, distinct entity versus the left arm. The Kalim are definitely in a state of a mahus and of substance, and a mitzius, spheris mamish, and literally an element of spheros, of attributes. Right? I'm going to skip the parentheses for a minute just to finish the thought. And if we're going to say that the light is literally limitless, the argument we wanted to make in the last Maamor, that all the limitations are only from the vessels, but the light is a complete reflection of the Or Ein Sof that's before the Tzimtzum. It's completely limitless. How is it possible that they should reveal themselves or enclose themselves in the vessel, which enclosement means full revelation, b'pchinas or pnimi, in an internalized manner? If they are limited, how can they internalize something that's limitless? Okay, let's go back a minute to the parentheses. When he mentioned that the kalim, the vessels, are for sure and definitely limited, he right away is making a note. These are not, it's not the limitation of creation, because they're not creations. In Atzilus, there's no creations. Atzilus is a world that is utterly divine. Even the vessels are divine. They are God. They are divinity. They are divine. Nevertheless, they are still something. Remember, we discussed they're not a somebody, which would mean that's already a creation, but they're still something, which means to have a definition. For who? Now, how can you say on God, on the divine, something that's still part of the divine realm, how can you say that it is a metzius, which means that it is of something? For who? And this is the idea. It's the concept, is very, very wild idea that God can self-limit himself to the point that he can turn himself into something. It's not that he created something, he is turning himself into something. This is like the remember I had a whole discussion in one of the classes. I remember which class exactly, but we discussed this. We compared just like a soul. We said a soul is not a creation, but a soul is God that metamorphosizes into a created consciousness. But the soul is even stronger because it goes down into a created consciousness. The spheros of Atzilus are Or Ein Sof that metamorphosizes itself to be, but it's still just like we said, a caterpillar is still the butterfly. It's when the butterfly is a butterfly, it's still in essence the caterpillar that became the butterfly. So here it's the same thing. It's Elokus Nasa. Elokus becomes B'chinas Metzius, in a state of Metzius of something. And that's all to demonstrate that the Kalim are defined, limited entities. It's like God self-limiting himiself. As it says, going back to the famous statement of Avodas HaKodesh, that when he says that God has limitless ability, and he also must have, because of his perfection, also the power to limit himself. And the first limited expression of God, this is what he says, the first limited expression of God, that's the spheros, and we discussed it earlier, that's the kalim. As he mentions over here, that these are the vessels. Comes out that we'll all have to agree that the vessels of Atzilus are limited. And once we agree on that, then we can turn and ask ourselves, well, if they're limited, how can they contain within themselves a infusion? How can they host a soul that is truly and absolutely infinite? And that soul should reveal itself inside of them. That's not possible. So therefore, that's what he is using as another proof to prove that the lights are not, in the full sense of the word, utterly limitless. And that's where the Maamor is going to continue later. He's going to go back and forth with this idea whether the Kalim are limited in the next piece, but we'll leave that, Be'ezrat Hashem, for the next class.